Hello, my fellow scumbag friends, and welcome to High Ground. I've got the high ground today, and we are going to be talking about a very specific character. I'm Andrew Fantasia, by the way, but I'm not the very specific character we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about this character. General Leia. That's her. Right there. She's General of the Resistance. Former senator of the New Republic, former senator of the Old Republic, former senator of the Empire, I should say. But General Leia is the focus of today's high ground because there have been I've mentioned before that I'm working on a Star Wars database that I've been trying to put together. Where I would sort of catalog all the major characters, all the planets and moons we visit, all the ships, that kind of thing. Just something so it's easier, because it's fun, first of all. I like doing it, because I'm a nerd, see? But on top of being fun, it's also something that's beneficial to me and to the Rebel Scum channel, because it'll be a handy reference. We can, if we're thinking like, oh God, who's Oxy Cray Corbin? I don't remember who that is. I can open that database and be, oh, this is who she is, and these are the books she's been in, and these are the movies she's been in, etc., etc. So it's going to be very helpful when all is said and done, and the best part is I'm constantly going to be adding to it because Disney is not hitting the brakes anytime soon. But as I've been making this database, the one thing that I've noticed very frequently is there are two characters, in all of new canon, first of all, this database is strictly just canon, not legends. In all of new canon, the character who has popped up in films, comics, novels, games, etc., more than anybody else by a pretty wide margin is this character right here. Princess Leia. Now General Leia. She is in more material in new Star Wars canon than any other character. And surprisingly enough, you know who's in second? Just as a fun side act bar, second place? Saw Gerrera. That dude's everywhere now. Lies! But we're not here to talk about Saw. We're here to talk about General Leia. And specifically, we're here to talk about two books that have really focused on Leia. First as a princess, then as a general. And I've done some book reviews in the past, but they were, when the channel was new and they were pretty ghetto, and I was just standing in a room being like, I like this book. But now that we have high ground, now that we can, take some more time and really dig into the meat of these books. That's what we're going to do. And since this is a Leia episode, I'm going to be talking about Leia books, namely Bloodline, and then Leia, Princess of Alderaan. Both of them feature Leia, and both of them are written by a Miss Claudia Gray, who is, as it stands right now, the best author working on Star Wars, and one of my favorite authors working today, period. She is fantastic. Claudia Gray wrote 3 books so far for new canon and 1 short story, and I hope she keeps going because she's great. 2 of these books have focused exclusively on Leia, and that's what we're going to talk about, starting with Bloodline because that was released first. Actually, no, you know what? I'm going to do something wacky, and I'm going to start with this because even though Bloodline was released first, this comes chronologically. This one's about Princess Leia. Bloodline's about Senator and then General Leia. But let's start with Leia, Princess of Alderaan, because this is all about Miss Leia herself. That's her right there. That's a beautiful drawing of her, by the way. I don't know who drew this. I'm sure it's... Oh, yeah. The illustration's by Daniel Balling Walsh. So, good job, man. That's great. This is all about her growing up on Alderaan. It takes place a couple years before New Hope. She obviously hasn't met Luke yet. None of that has happened. She is strictly just going through the motions of being a princess of Alderaan, hence the title. And I'm going to dip into some spoilers here. So if you haven't read these books yet, they're fairly old now, especially Bloodline. But if you haven't read them yet, just a word of warning. We're gonna dive in. We're going to chew on some gristle. This book really opens your eyes as to what kind of a person she is, because every time we see Leia in any of the movies and any of the other ancillary material, especially later on in the storyline, she's a very jaded person. Not in a bad way. She's not like bitter and mean and like, don't talk to me. She's still a cool lady, but she's seen some horrific stuff. She's been tortured by Vader. Remember, this is the first time we meet her in A New Hope. She gets tortured. So this is a rare look at a Leia before all of that. This is a wide-eyed, innocent Leia, and we never really get that. And like you can even tell just looking at this picture, that's not the face of a girl who's been tortured. That's the face of a girl who's still finding her place in things. So we got a Leia in here that we've never seen before, which is something Claudia Gray is so good at doing. Is she is great at painting pictures of familiar characters in unfamiliar ways. Now this book touches, mostly it's about her learning eventually that her father and mother are secretly planning a rebellion against the Empire. She, of course, at first she's unaware of it, and Bail and Breha Organa want to keep it that way because they don't want her mixed up in any of this. They know how dangerous the Empire is, and if she knew anything, they would kill her for it. That's Palpatine. That's how he rules, baby. He's ruthless. So they want to protect her as much as possible, even though we all know it's inevitable that she's going to be right front and center of everything. And it's actually kind of heartbreaking because the whole book, every time we look at anything through the eyes of Bail Organa or of Queen Breha, every fiber of their being is bent on keeping Leia safe and keeping Alderaan safe. And knowing what we know in the future, knowing that A, Alderaan is not going to be safe, and B, Leia is going to be driven right into the hands of the enemy several times, and she will be tortured and hurt and chewed up by the Empire. That just makes it so much sadder because we know that Bail and Breha are just buying time at this point. They're just looking out for their little girl and keeping her safe from these monsters who will get her because we've seen them get her. We know they get her. Of course, Leia ends up winning the war. Everything's great, and she has the baby with Han, and that baby turns out fine and perfectly normal in every way. But we won't get to that right now. The Princess of Alderaan story also introduces a love interest for Leia. And I'll be damned if I can remember his name. That's not a detriment to his character. He's not a bad character. I just... Kir Domadi. That's it. I had to flip through to see it. Kir Domadi becomes Leia's boyfriend, and I think her first boyfriend, if memory serves me right. She meets him during this pilgrimage that every noble child of Alderaan has to take. There's these pilgrimages where they go and they learn about the world, and her being a princess is really driven on that. Like, she has to do this if she wants to be queen, and then the other kids are kind of doing it, for their own reasons, but it's very much a ceremonial rite of passage. And other kids are doing it from other planets. They're not all Alderaanians. And in fact, we meet one character in here who is, if you can see right here, right on the top there, this is a journey to Star Wars: The Last Jedi. That's important because we meet a character who we won't see in the flesh until The Last Jedi, and that is Emmeline Holdo, who will be played by Laura Dern. We get to see her in this book. And I'm going to draw the comparison because everybody I know who's read this book has drawn the same comparison, so I know I'm not alone. If you've read Harry Potter, she's Luna Lovegood. It's to a T. She's got that Luna Lovegood thing going on. She's airy, she's wacky. Stuff will be going on, and there'll be a shootout happening, and Leia will be like, "Oh my God, people are shooting at us. What should we do, Emmeline?" And Emmeline's like, "Doesn't Saturn look beautiful right now?" There's no Saturn in the Star Wars universe. I'm paraphrasing, but you understand what I'm talking about. That's Emmeline in a nutshell. Leia's worried about what's happening with her father and the rebellion and all the secrecy, and she goes to Emmeline for support, and Emmeline is like, "I find that hot yoga helps. Let's do hot yoga together right now. What do you think Banthas dream about?" She's that kind of person, and she's very cool. You like her. And there's that great sense of first impressions not being everything. And you got that with Luna Lovegood as well in Harry Potter, but you get that here too, where when Leia first is on this expedition with all these other rich kids, Emmeline is friendless. She's not buddies with anybody on this expedition because she's so weird. And Leia, we're looking at everything through Leia's eyes, and Leia's like, "Wow, that girl's weird. I don't know about her." But as the story goes on, Leia gets to know that there's a human being under that weirdness, and she's actually a pretty decent human being too. So we learn, not to take anything at face value, and we come to appreciate Emmeline Holdo. And that makes me more excited for Last Jedi, because I was always under the impression that Emmeline Holdo was going to be a rival for Leia. The way they were setting up that character, just in terms of the movie, it looked like she was going to be bad news, like a senator who's like, I don't like this Leia person at all. Let's not give her funding for stuff. But now that I know that they're BFFs, she was essentially one of her best friends as a teenager. So I don't think that that's the case anymore. I think we're getting an Emmeline Holdo who is willing to help out the Resistance with open arms. So I can't wait for that. Now, again, spoilers here. There's obviously there's some things going on in this book that will hurt people to read, because, like I said earlier, we know how the story of Alderaan ends, and we know how Leia's story kind of ends. The Empire is always sniffing at Bail Organa's heels. The Empire doesn't know he's up to anything yet, but that's the Empire. They're always around. They're always getting people's business, and they're like, oh, what are you doing? Bail Organa and his wife always hold these lavish banquets for these rebels, and they hide it under the guise of, oh, we're just all friends and socialites, and we just have these banquets all the time. But really, those banquets are just meetings so they can, sit around and say, okay, how are we going to take down Palpatine? And there's a moment in this book, a great moment. It was like straight out of the first scene of Inglourious Bastards. It was like that tense, where they're about to have this banquet, and Tarkin shows up. And Tarkin is just like, oh, I was in the neighborhood, and I heard you were having one of your famous get-togethers, and I just wanted to come and see what's going on. Like, he wasn't... He had some pretense of being there on business. Like, it was... I can't remember exactly what he said, but he's there on business for something, and he just came in to pay his respects. And he's like, oh, you're having one of those banquets I've heard about. And Bail and Breha kind of look at each other, and they're both thinking the same thing. Like, if we don't invite him, that'll look bad. So they have to kind of smile and say, oh, Governor Tarkin, please, like, we'd be honored to have you here. You're such an important Imperial. Please come sit with us, join our banquet. So for the rest of this banquet, which was supposed to be talking rebel business, they have to keep up appearances as, lovers of the Empire and feed this horrible man and lie through their teeth. And the charade that they put on to first assuage Tarkin's suspicions and then to sort of throw him off their scent entirely. I won't spoil that because it's so damn good. But that is one of the most tense scenes I have ever read in any book, period. Claudia Gray knows her stuff, man, I'm telling you. And unfortunately, again, spoilers here, we are, when we get to the end of the book, some bad things happen to Leia's boyfriend. We know she doesn't have a boyfriend in A New Hope, so you can pretty much guess what kind of bad things those are. But there's a great moment at the end where Leia is ruminating on everything that's happened to her, and she's fully a rebel now. She's fully like in it to win it. She's like, I'm gonna help my mom and dad with whatever they need done. And there's a beautiful moment that caps off the book where she says that she has her family. Like she lost Kier, she lost this boy that she loved, but she has her family, and she has her home world, and nothing can take that away from her. And that just crushed me. Like, that is so sad. But that's the power of Claudia Gray, and that's the power of Leia. She's a great character. And of course, this book came out after we lost Carrie Fisher, so it hits home even more than it normally would. I'm curious to know if she was writing this before Carrie passed away, and if that changed anything in her process. But that is Princess of Alderaan. And FYI, we get to visit Crate in this book, which is going to play a huge part in The Last Jedi. We see Crate everywhere. That white crystal planet with all the red smoke, that's Crate. We're going to see it in here. If you haven't noticed, white and red is kind of a recurring theme. And then we're going to move on to Bloodline. Again, by Claudia Gray. Now, y'all have pointed this out. I got some flack for it. and I deserved that flack. Where there's a very important part of this book that I totally forgot about when I was making an earlier video. I think it was an I Rebel video. And you all called me out on it, and you were right. I should not have forgotten because it's a very important part of the book, but I'll get to it when we get to it. Bloodline came out before Princess of Alderaan, and it is a story that takes place 6 years before The Force Awakens. Kylo Ren is not yet Kylo Ren. He's just Ben Solo, but he is not in this book. Luke Skywalker is not yet in exile on Acto. He is still a Jedi Master trying to fight the good fight, but he is not in this book. This book is about Leia, and sometimes Han. Han shows up, but Leia is a senator in the New Republic. The New Republic is still, it's still kicking. It's been kicking since the Battle of Jakku. They've been doing their thing. I think Mon Mothma's not around. She's mentioned it here, but I don't think they give a clear answer of whether she's still alive at this point or not. But Mon Mothma's not in the picture. And the galaxy the political side of the galaxy has been separated into two factions, the populists and the centrists. To boil it down to a very basic understanding is that the centrists want there to be one ruling government, similar to the Emperor, just not evil. They want one person to hold the power and to keep everything in check. Whereas the populists think that the galaxy's too big for that. You need to kind of look at it planet by planet and make sure that every individual's planet's needs are met by representatives. And Leia is a populist. But neither side really has an advantage at the moment. It's really sort of split down the middle. And then Leia, early on in the book, meets a centrist senator who is a young man. He's 15 years younger than Leia. His name is Ransom Casterfo. And Ransom, again, is a centrist senator. He believes in the opposing belief that Leia does. But he's got some interesting stuff going on for him. He grew up on a slave world. Like a world where the Empire enslaved everybody and made them dig in a mine because that world had precious minerals or whatever. And Ransom's mother and father were actually killed by Darth Vader. They were, being insubordinate or what have you. They weren't working as hard as the Empire thinks they should have, so Vader force choked them. That was that. And now Ransom is an orphan. He survived the war, obviously, and now he is a very popular and very successful centrist senator. And you would think, and you'd be initially right, that a centrist senator and a populist senator do not get along. They don't like each other. And that goes double when Leia goes to visit him in his office. And when she steps into Ransom's office, Ransom has a startlingly big collection of Imperial artifacts. He has TIE fighter helmets. He has like Sith relics that Palpatine would collect. Little things like this. He has Imperial flags with Palpatine's face on it or with the Imperial logo on it. It'd be like walking into somebody's house now and seeing like swastikas everywhere and being like, I'm gonna go. And that's pretty much how Leia reacts to this. She's very offended. She's like, how can you hang that up? Those people tortured me. How can you hang that up in your office in a place of prominence like that? How can you display that? And his reasoning for it, and this is one of the reasons why I think he's such a cool character, is because he's very complex. One of his reasonings is that he says that, look, I'm not hanging it because I'm glorifying the Empire. I'm hanging it because I'm fascinated by what the Empire did. They fascinate me. The good and the bad. Everything that they did interests me. And he says that at some point he thinks the best way, because he is a centrist, remember, the best way to get the galaxy into order and to preserve peace is to do what the Empire did, just don't be tyrannical about it. Essentially, he's like pulling a Google. He's like, I'm going to take over the world, but don't be evil. He wants a central ruler. He wants another emperor. He says he brings up the point several times to Leia. He says, there's nothing wrong with having an emperor. We just had a really, really crappy one. And that's a good point. Palpatine is not a good person. As much as I love him, he's not a nice dude. And to have him be in charge of everything is not an ideal way to run a galaxy. So Casterfield's belief is, let's get somebody in charge. Let's get another emperor, but this time we're going to do it right. So Leia, of course, is like, hell no, and she doesn't want any part of it. But circumstances keep sort of driving these two to work together on a case involving Ryloth, the planet Ryloth, where the Twi'leks come from. They've been having trouble with organized crime. And Leia and Ransom undertake this. They want to help out Ryloth. So they follow this trail of criminals, this like underworld trail. And it starts to lead them to some really dark, shady corners of the galaxy. And I won't go into too much detail about what they find, because most of the plot, and so you can see it's a pretty hefty book, most of the plot revolves around them following these criminals' activities and sort of like trying to figure out what it is they're trying to do. And over the course of the book, Leia and Ransom Casterfield become very good friends. They actually develop a deep respect and appreciation for each other. And because Han's not around, like Leia finds, like, he's normally her kindred spirit. You know, they have a lot in common. So she finds this kindred spirit in this friend, in Ransom. And she thinks, you know, this guy's a good guy. He's good people. Even though he's not a populist like me, he's got a good heart. And they bond over their shared hatred of Vader. I mean, Ransom, like I said, Vader killed his parents, and Leia's like, Vader did all these horrible, torturous things to me. He froze my husband in carbonite. He could have died. He almost killed my brother. They have common ground in their hatred for Darth Vader. And as you can see, Darth Vader is actually on this book because he plays his ghost kind of looms over everything. But then stuff starts to get complicated in a very Game of Thrones, House of Cards kind of way. And what ends up happening is there is a senator, another senator. Her name is, oh God, why am I blanking on the names today? Carice Sindian. There we go. I don't need to check the book. Carice Sindian. And she is this glamorous, beautiful, status-obsessed senator. If Instagram was a thing in the galaxy, she would constantly be like this. I picture a Kardashian whenever this girl comes in the picture. That she's that kind of person. And she's very stuck up. She's obsessed with titles. She wants to be a lady. She wants to be Lady Carice Sindian. And she is a centrist, like Ransom. However, she's got some shady dealings going on with some shady people. And at one point, there's early on in the book, there's a planet, I can't remember what it's called, but this planet has a sort of system that's quasi-monarchy, but not really, where it's a hereditary sort of system of titles. And Leia is, through, you know, a large family tree, is next in line to inherit this title, which I believe is Lady, on this planet. And they invite her and they say, we'd like you to come to the ceremony so you can accept your title and, you know, all that. And Leia's like, look, I don't have time for this. And it's Carice Sindian who tells her about this invite. And Leia knows that Carice is more obsessed with this than she is. So to kind of get Carice out of her hair and get this out of her way, because she doesn't care about it, Leia's like, Carice, you know what? I don't give a rat's ass about this. This is not my cup of tea. Tell you what, why don't you go? Because you come from a noble house, and it wouldn't be far-fetched for them to give the title to you. So you go, you do it, you can have the title, and that way you can have the support from that planet in the centrist faction. Carice is like, okay, are you sure? I'm already halfway out the door. All right, okay, fine, if that's what you want. And she runs off and goes and becomes Lady on this planet. But because it was initially supposed to be Leia getting that title, the current ruler of that planet had a gift specifically for Leia. And that gift was it's kind of like a hope chest, essentially. And Alderaanian youth all have this chest. It's a custom on Alderaan. And in fact, in Princess of Alderaan, at the very end of the book, you see that chest. She actually has a lock of her boyfriend's hair, and she puts it in that chest. Carice Sindian is given like all these treasures by this planet, and one of them is this box that was supposed to be Leia's. And the people are like, yeah, sorry, we thought Leia was going to show up, so if you could just give her that box, that's hers, that'd be great. It's just her personal effects from Alderaan. And Carice, you know, at first, she's not a nice lady, but she's not like going to be like a petty thief. She's not going to be like, ooh, mine now. She's just like, yeah, I'll whatever, I'll give that to Leia. It's probably her old like teddy bear or whatever. I'll give that to her when I see her. I don't care about that. Then curiosity starts to get the better of her. And Carice can't help it, and she digs through the stuff, and she's like, oh, what's in here? She finds a lock of hair, and she finds like other things, I think like a diary or something. She's like, ugh, boring. And then she finds a music box. And she opens it, and it starts to play music, and she's like, oh, this is sweet, whatever, but again, I don't care, and this is beneath me. But then the music box stops playing music, and there is a message in the box, a hologram message from Bail Organa, that he left, obviously before he died, that he left for Leia at some point not long before he died. And the message was basically him dropping the mother of all bombshells, where he says, Leia, you know you're adopted. We've told you since you were little, you know, your mother and I, we couldn't have a baby, so we adopted you. But it's time for you to know who your real parents are, and you're not going to like the answer. And in this message, he spills the beans. He tells her basically the whole plot of Revenge of the Sith. He tells her, look, your father was this man who did some very, very bad things, and he did not like sand one bit, and Palpatine manipulated him and did this and that, and now he's Darth Vader. And you have a brother somewhere, but I don't know where he is, and I don't want to know, because that's the whole point. He's hiding. And normally, you know, you would, like, obviously Leia already knows these things because Luke filled her in. You know, they already, this is all old news to them. But Carice Sindian listens to this message, and it is the smoking gun to end all smoking guns. It would benefit her to remove Leia from the equation, because there's an election coming up that would put one of the two parties in a position of great power. And obviously Carice wants that power, but everybody loves Leia. So she's probably going to win the election. So that's why Carice gives this information. She doesn't spill the beans, but she gives the information to Ransom Casterfo. And she says, oh, I'm so sorry, honey, but your friend is Darth Vader's daughter. She's been lying to everybody. And it's Ransom, not Carice, who goes before the Senate and plays the message for the whole universe to hear. And at that point, everybody learns the truth about who Leia's father really is. That's why Vader's ghost is hovering over Leia. That's why his presence is in this book, and that's why it's called Bloodline. And this, to me, is one of the coolest things that has been done in any Star Wars book ever, because it is a real thing that would absolutely present a problem to somebody who's trying to be a politician. If Joseph Stalin was my father and I tried to run for president, I think one or two people might have some things to say about that. So Leia's reputation is absolutely destroyed. Aside from like a handful of close friends, nobody wants to talk to her anymore. And this is the part that I totally forgot about, and you called me out on it, and I deserved that, which is I was under the impression that when Ben was a little kid, you know, Han and Leia told him, hey, your grandfather's Darth Vader, so don't be bad like him. I know you have the Force, but don't use it the way he did. That wasn't the case. They hadn't told him yet. So there's a scene in this book right after that moment where everybody learns the truth, where she's like, her first priority is, I have to call my son and tell him so that he hears it from me first before he hears it from God knows who else. Because she's got to say to her boy, your grandfather's Darth Vader. I'm sorry, your grandfather is this horrible human being. And we never see that conversation, which is interesting. She says, okay, she's stealing herself. She's like, I have to call Ben. And then it jump cuts to later on where she's like, I called Ben. And obviously it wasn't pretty. It wasn't a good conversation, but I did it. I think we're going to see that conversation, whether it's in The Last Jedi as a flashback, whether it's in a comic somewhere. It's too important not to see, I think. It's what makes Ben start to become Kylo. So I think that that's coming up sooner rather than later. And then, obviously, you know, more politics happen, more conspiracy happens. To sum it up in short, Carice Sindian was the person who was funding all of these criminals. Because Leia, the whole time Leia is like, where is their money coming from? These criminals have more money than they should. And it's revealed that Carice is funding them through money acquired from the First Order. Everything's coming from the First Order, who nobody knows exists yet. So Snoke is paying the monies to give these criminals whatever they need. So he is essentially really the puppet master with all the money. He's got the bling. And that's sort of our way of Leia finding out that there's a thing called the First Order. And at the end of the book, she starts the resistance because she doesn't want any part of the Senate anymore, and it doesn't want any part of her. But I'm gonna go on record here and say that this is the only book I've ever read. It's maybe with the exception of like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I'd have to think back and remember if it did this, but this is the only book I've ever read that I can say 100% certain actually made me cry. It's hard for a book to make you cry because there's nothing visual, there's nothing audible, like you don't hear sad music, you don't see people expressing. It's all just words on a page and you kind of have to do the work. But I tend to sort of almost act it out in my head, so it kind of became more real for me that way. And the fate of her friend Ransom Casterfo is heartbreaking. And when it gets to that point where you find out, you know, what ends up happening to Ransom, that's where I lost it. And I was like, oh man, this poor guy. So it's just like Claudia Gray, again, she knocked this one out of the park too. She's great. She wrote Lost Stars as well. You cannot lose with Claudia Gray. So that was Bloodline, and that was Leia, Princess of Alderaan. These are two of the best books in new canon. And that's, you know, hands down. And one of the other best ones is Lost Stars, which Claudia Gray also wrote, and Leia's in that as a cameo. And a lot of bits and pieces of those three books really interconnect. There's a great scene in Lost Stars where there's a big like party, like a big ball, a fancy ball, and Leia shows up for a bit and dances with some people, and it's all cool. But that's just like a cameo. And then in this book, we see that ball, but we see it from her perspective, and she's there with her boyfriend Kier, and they're dancing, and it's all about her. So it's really tied in beautifully. This is how I wish the movies did it. I wish they tied in stuff as fluidly as Claudia Gray does. So that has been Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and Bloodline. You owe it to yourself. If you love Leia, if you love Star Wars, if you love reading, you owe it to yourself to read Claudia Gray's books. They're fantastic. I wanted to sort of bring attention to them because we're getting closer to Last Jedi, and because the issue of Leia and Carrie Fisher and what's going to happen to this character is such a big question mark right now. That is literally the roadblock that kind of puts all of our theories in check. It's like, well, this could happen, but we don't know what's happening to Leia. Or how about this? But we can't have Leia. So like we just got to see this movie. We got 20 days-ish to see it. It's happening. We just got to be patient. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you check out those books because they're great. Don't forget, we are on Patreon. Rebel Scum Podcast is on Patreon. You can support us and give us hugs and money and flowers and all kinds of great things. And that way you get early access to videos. And you can even take part in some of our trivia contests. It's great stuff. Check out Patreon. All the tiers are there. It explains what they do. Until next time, I am Andrew Fantasia. This has been High Ground. And may the force of others be with you. Always.
Hey scumbags, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up on our video. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Rebel Scum Podcast, for all the latest videos.